How does one earn a PhD in physics when raised in violence, poverty, and ignorance? In previous episodes of the Touring Rabbit Holes podcast, we have discussed scientific questions. What is consciousness? How is artificial intelligence something created by humans, both similar and different to human intelligence? We showed that current AI systems behave intelligently, like besting chess and Go champions, but are otherwise unconscious. Today, we're going to talk about something a little different. We're going to talk about socioeconomic challenge and science education. How much does one's zip code, where you're born, affect the odds of succeeding in STEAM, which is science, technology, engineering, arts, and math? You're going to be hearing a little bit about the backgrounds of your two hosts today. What's our story? What got us interested in science? Why do I identify as a science evangelist? We're going to talk all about that today and about what converted us, I suppose. But above all, what challenges did we face? Given that, what do we have to say about science education and education in general in today's world? Now, I want to give you all a little bit of a content warning. We're going to talk about some very deep things today. We will be talking about domestic abuse that actually does play a role in our story, and that is a very serious topic. It's a very relevant topic, and it's a far more common occurrence than I think any of us would like it to be. And it certainly has a role in shaping who we are today. We will also be discussing post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. PTSD doesn't just hurt war veterans or their family. It even puts everybody in danger, and it's a very real thing that a lot of us deal with in today's world. All of this and more in today's episode of the Touring Rabbit Holes podcast. Now, before we get into our episode in which we talk about our stories and our interest in science education, we do have a little bit of an update that we'd like to share about COVID-19. Alex, I'll go ahead and give you the floor on this one.
So this is a topic that we're going to be discussing towards the end of the episode, but this is a preview. And this is what foreign nationals bring to our country. I went to grad school with a young Italian. We started school at the exact same time. I finished my PhD about a year ahead of him. Since then, and he's been working very hard. He has a company named Excel Diagnostics, and he's based out of Houston. And he has this microfluidics magnetic credit card looking thing, which is very good at testing for various kinds of proteins, etc. And he's been working his butt off to get this company going. And with COVID, I think they have a potential test coming up as it goes through the regulatory processes, quite soon potentially. And I just wanted to bring that our country is made out of immigrants and that we bring a lot to it.
Yes, actually, so many immigrants in our nation's history have contributed greatly to the economy and to science in general. Albert Einstein was an immigrant. Niels Bohr was an immigrant. So many. We could do an entire episode on the contributions of immigrants. Even Steve Jobs' father was a Middle Eastern immigrant to this country as well. And actually, we'll even show a screenshot of the website here on the show if you'd like to see it yourself. It's quite interesting, a new COVID-19 antibody test. So that's pretty exciting. Now, without further ado, we'll go ahead and get into our stories. Alex, I want to thank you very much for this episode. I realize that this is a different kind of episode. We typically get really into the technical details of things. So to convey a story that is part of our identity requires us to think a little differently. And the fact that you're going to share your story, and of course, I'm going to share mine as well. Well, first of all, thank you for that. And I hope that this will serve as inspiration for people who may have perhaps, may have experienced something similar, or even has a different type of struggle, but is still interested in making the most out of their lives and interested in STEM education. So, without further ado, I'll go ahead and go to you.
So this is some reading I'll be doing. I'll try to keep it light and quick. As you know from these episodes, I have a doctoral degree in particle physics, and I haven't introduced my wife. She's an attorney at Sandia National Laboratories, and She deals with export control and international traffic and arms regulations and many things at Sunday National Laboratories. And so I at this point in my life, my family is extremely successful by many metrics. And for instance, our eldest daughter, she's a beginning junior in college, and she's very passionate about dealing with climate change and dealing it. She wants to work as a corporate scientist possibly, and she, as a freshman, immediately, within her first week, tapped into professional societies over there. She found a professor and started doing research. And she has scholarships right now from NOAA, which is the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration. She would have been in Puerto Rico if it hadn't been for COVID, doing research over there. She's a member of the Circle K International. She's an officer of that club that tries to promote education and awareness of the climate and other things like that. And she's already being mentored. She's got a mentor already lining her up for a potential grad school.
Interesting. So real quick, obviously, with you've told me the story before. Your daughter has a lot of support around her. Her experience is a little bit different than your experience growing up, which I know that we're going to get to. But this is an interesting contrast in this episode.
And so I will definitely contrast that. And just to set the reference, I work for the Air Force, and I get to do a lot of research that I'm interested in, and I also get to coordinate with other junior scientists and with other folks in the military-industrial community, as I like to call it. And so I'm really enjoying my life at this point, and I'm really enjoying working for the Air Force and trying to bring the future forward and keep the peace, so to speak.
Yeah, awesome. So the title of today's episode is How Does One Earn a PhD in Physics When Raised in Violence, Poverty, and Ignorance? We'd like to ponder that question and related questions as you share your story with us. We invite you to ponder these questions as we share our background and why we are here today. I know I've said that a few times, but again, that's an ongoing theme here. It's an ongoing theme about personal struggles and how people can find success in their life, and in this case, especially in science.
Right. So my earliest memories, they go back to Italy. I was born on an Air Force base in Arizona, and we flew off to Italy. And to go back a little bit further, I will say that my father was an airman in Washington State, and he was guarding, of all things, nuclear bombers, which is kind of funny because I'm in the nuclear business, as is my wife. And he met my mother there, and she was there with her many siblings and her parents, and they had come from Mexico seasonally to do migrant work. And her education at that point did not extend beyond elementary school. In fact, I don't think she finished elementary school. My father, he eventually finished his high school diploma in the Air Force because I guess they required it at some point. He ended up going to the Vietnam War. He was embedded with a United Nations group of Republic of Korea soldiers, and he was with one other GI, and his job was forward air controller. And what that is you go out into the jungles of Vietnam and you quietly sneak up on the enemy. You try to make contact. When you do, you pick up your radio and you call in airstrikes for napalm airstrikes. What I was told was that the Vietnamese forces, the VC, would be quiet until detected. Then they had nothing to lose. They'd fight back. So he saw a lot of stuff out there. My earliest memories are of domestic violence. And I think, there was always a yelling and things flying and, hurting my mom. When he came back from the war, it was worse, and I think a part of it had to do not only with the combat that he saw, but there are these photos of my father with this 5-year-old Vietnamese little girl, and I was 5 years old at the time, and the idea he was sending letters home. The idea is that we were going to adopt her and get her out of an orphanage. It may have been a Catholic orphanage, and my memories, which may be wrong, is that she did not survive, and all I have left of proof of these memories is my father, when he passed away, left behind his military papers, and I found the international adoption papers. So how much of it's in my mind manufactured, I don't know. And I have no idea how life would have been if I had had a 5-year-old sister. She'd be 54 years old at the moment. So back home, it was anything. It was a sudden noise or no reason at all. He would go into these, he'd be in his own world, and he'd be violent. And he'd lash out at objects, but if you were near enough and you got caught in it, you get pretty hurt yourself. And my mom took the brunt of that. And I quickly became protector. I became the protector of my mother. My sister would not be born for another 7 years. And I have these vivid memories of going out to the park with the family on a weekend and something terrible going wrong. And he goes to the car and we go and hide behind a tree because, well, he's going to charge at us with the car. And it keeps up this way. And, old age eventually got to them and they started to slow down. It's my father. But by the time I turned 16, my father was at that time a captain for a sheriff's department. There were 3 events, there were 3 times in my life when I thought, well, this is it. This is the day that I'm going to die. I think I was 16 years old. What had started off as a normal drive with my father, but something went wrong. And he grabbed me and he starts bashing my head and the accelerometer goes and we're swerving and we're on a highway and he's yelling at me. And I just remember thinking to myself, what's the word I'm looking for? Resigned that, well, this is it. This is where the story ends. And so, let's see, let me get onto this. What I want to bring to this episode is, that's a lot of strikes, right? That's a lot of strikes against a person. I did not come from educated parents. I did come from a lot of physical violence. And if you look at the literature today, any one of these factors and others contribute to failure. And so I ended up skipping out of high school. The story is when my father retired, he went to go get his RN. I was in the 7th grade. He had to learn algebra. I was learning algebra. I tutored him. I thought, well, what the hell am I doing in this junior high school playpen? And so I decided to try to go to college. I was very fortunate. I had a young woman. Her name was Michelle. I'll leave it at that. Her father was a professor at the local college, and she listened to me. Her brother was similar to me. I think he was already taking classes at the local college. And so she talked to her father about me, and I was able to skip out of high school and go and start my life. I ended up serving as an Air Force officer and getting my MS in math and PhD in physics. And my initial pursuit of physics was completing Einstein's dream. He was looking for a final theory. And ironically, to my delight, there are no final theories. There's just theories that extend from the experimental edge. And go ahead, please.
Oh, yeah. So that's... So I was a science teacher, and also I was a kindergarten teacher and a middle school teacher. And, as a teacher, you see a variety of different backgrounds. And right now, I need to say, I am absolutely in awe. You talk about this background that you had, at home with a father who clearly had PTSD, and you had a lot of unpredictability. Just the likelihood of you even going to college at all. I mean, I can't really do this, but I'm trying to put myself in those shoes, and I think I would have just checked out. I wouldn't have even been interesting. So that's a part of the story that I'd like you to tell a little bit more on. Like, what was it, given your background and given the wildly unpredictable childhood you had, where you weren't sure if you were going to make it out? What was it that made you say, yes, I am going to do this, and I'm going to study math and science, or anything at all for that matter?
Yeah, when I go back and think about that was an incredibly exciting period of human history. I remember the moment that humanity, our representatives, men in this case, landed on the moon, and I remember being drawn to Star Trek, and I've seen so many biographies of engineers and successful scientists going, that was the show that got me started. So there was Star Trek. Of course, there was the United States Air Force. And for all my father's flaws, he loved the Air Force, and every once in a while he'd bring me in and I'd see all the gadgets and for controlling aircraft. And I was very, I had that example. I had the example of Italy. And for all that was going on in terms of PTSD, this was a man who loved opera and who loved his time in Italy and who loved classical art, while my mother was teaching herself to read English and become an English speaker.
Interesting. So, okay. Yeah, it's interesting. You know, when you're sharing a story, there's just so many elements of what makes a person, you know, who they are. And I'm just, I'm trying to get a better understanding of this. So he sounds like he certainly was a man who valued culture. And despite your upbringing, you still certainly had an appreciation for the Air Force and for science and technology and for human development. So
he lived in the library. He would bring back books, and he would bring back Descartes and Pascal. And so I had that as an example. So I attribute it to maybe a natural part of me that was just, I wanted to order the universe. And like I said, complete Einstein's dream.
Interesting.
And what's interesting to me, and just as a quick aside, is the way I see physics is we have the experimental edge and the models that describe it fairly well. And then the mathematicians come with lots of degrees of freedom, and they expand to what might be possible. Mm-hmm. And then, experiment stretches out, and you go, oh, those were nice math, but here's where physics goes. And I see that as a process that may never end. And I think that's more beautiful than possibly finding a final theory. So I'm very happy with my understanding of physics at the moment.
Wow, interesting. Man, there's a lot more to say about that, about everything, about, your experiences with your father with PTSD and, just obviously domestic abuse. There's so much to that story. And there's, I think about, I was not around, back then. So I don't have a lot to say about how those kind of things were talked about in society, how society acknowledged it and or dealt with it. I do hear about that as a teacher this day and age, and we are actually taught to look for signs of abuse. May I ask, from your memory, was that something that was talked about publicly back when you were growing up?
Absolutely not. Of course not.
Okay.
And it was very Air Force. It was, and I knew that I wanted to join the Air Force, and I knew that I wanted to be an astronaut. Which that path didn't happen. I did do the Air Force, and so it was. You admit no fault. You admit no weakness. So no, absolutely not.
Interesting.
And one last point I'd like to add to why I think I became a physicist, and why, and more than a physicist, ultimately interested in how intelligence works at the human level and at the grand society level, with countries and stock markets that are composed of many actors, including machine actors these days. Mm-hmm. And that is, I remember I did not like church. I was forced to go to church, my grandmother's church, and it would be interesting because they would pray for American forces and to safely bring them back and to do God's work. And I would wonder about this little girl, my temporal twin at 5 years of age. And I was like, oh, so I would think to myself, the zip code that you're born from is clearly very important to the religion of my grandmother.
Okay.
And so that didn't make sense. And so I also had a bigger picture besides physics, but us as humanity and how we work.
Yeah. Wow. No, those are some extremely deep questions. And I know you're also an anomaly in the sense that not everybody who grows up with that kind of a household, becomes a successful physicist. So lots that goes in. There's just a lot that goes into that. And obviously, as we're sharing this story, it's both shocking, but it's also exciting. And I guess I'm not sure how to take that. Like, how do I simultaneously hear about the terrifying parts of your childhood as well as the exciting parts of your motivation to understand the universe?
So my background has made me think a lot about how kids get through. And the other example, the other side of the other boundary condition, if you will, as a physicist, we like to do boundary conditions in extreme cases, is my daughter. And so we moved to Los Alamos, New Mexico, when she was roughly 2 years old, and we stayed there through when she was 10. And when we came back to Albuquerque, my wife took a job with the other nuclear weapons lab, Los Angeles National Laboratories, and I've been with the Air Force since that point. And so when she was at Los Alamos, we had a brood of kids, roughly 28 kids at one point in our little neighborhood in a new area of town that had been rebuilt because of a giant fire. these were the children of, I remember my catty corner to us was the other lab attorney and their kids, and then other physicists, literally mathematicians and physicists, Italians, we had from Peru, we had Costa Rica, we had, a Russian up the neighborhood, and so it was this idyllic place when you're young in Los Alamos, and this is the group that she had. So when we came down to Albuquerque, it just so happened that we're in the neighborhood that's associated with the probably the best high school that's public here, La Cueva High School, and my daughter's peers became coincidentally the kids of the colonels who were running the place where I worked at. So these kids brought their military brat background. They've been to Europe. They've been to odd bases like Edwards Air Force Base out in the desert. And so this is what she grew up with. And at times, the way I taught her and the way I've taught my son is I have a whiteboard, and our little whiteboards that we put on our lap or the one in my office. And I would always look for the glazed eyes. I would always go, okay. And as she learned more mathematics, geometry, well, I taught her about other geometries. As she learned about trig, I taught her more about trig. As she learned about calculus, well, what the hell? I went all for it. I went, well, here's a differential equation, here's a partial differential equation, here's how you separate variables, here's a Fourier transform, over years, not in a dump like that where it's all at once. And we talked about physics. And I love those years when she took biology and chemistry and physics 2 years and calculus 2 years. And she thought she was going to be a physics major. She ended up going into ecology. She's very interested in climate change. And like I said, from day one in college, she walked up to professors and professional societies, and she got integrated. And now what she wants to do is have freshman awareness at her school or wherever she goes to, and she wants to have outreach to have the freshmen be presented these options that they might not stumble on until they're juniors and they're looking for a project to graduate, as seniors eventually.
Nice. So I'm curious, since your daughter specifically is interested in outreach, and in saying what opportunities are there,
yeah.
Does she, it's going to sound like a silly question, but work with me here.
Yeah.
Does she have like a Twitter account? We could say, follow her on Twitter at this. Because, she might get some followers and people, and she can answer.
I'm encouraging her, and she might appear in one of our episodes. And she is there through NOAA and other she's there. And I think they just put her up on the Facebook, what her work is done.
Nice.
So at some point, I'm sure she will.
Okay, that's awesome. Wow. So I'm going to try to go ahead and digest what we've talked about so far. Again, not to continue to bring up these difficult things, but obviously you had a very, very difficult childhood, yet you were extraordinarily ambitious about something and you sought after it, and it turned out very, very well for you. And then from your success, the experience that your daughter has had has been entirely different for a variety of reasons here.
And that's a good point. Yeah. And I think that maybe 10% of kids, that's a rough number, are the ones who are completely passionate and completely want to do this and hit roadblocks, whether it's economic roadblocks. And the point about my daughter is that she had an example space that was gigantic. We've traveled around the world. Her grandfather is one of the founding fathers of medical physics.
Hold on a second. Her grandfather was one of the founders of medical physics. What a cool term. We should do an episode about where that field has gone and where it's going.
So in his time, you had a PhD in physics, and you went into medicine, whether it's MRI, whether it's ultrasound, whether it's radiation therapy. And he got a big lifetime award a few years back. He... through his influence, made an internship at Columbia Presbyterian Medical School up in New York City. So my daughter did an internship there. She did one here at the Mind Research Network with one of my peer mathematician friends. And so there's a comfort zone. She's hung around these old fogey PhDs, and she's I remember being so intimidated by professors and Dr. So-and-so, and they're just regular people for the most part.
They're just people.
Yeah. And so what is it when you don't have those examples? I had this I'm an aberrant. I just get things done, and I was going to get this done or die trying. There was a time when I nearly gave up. Yeah. There was a time when I thought, I went to grad school after getting my undergrad in physics, and I hit a brick wall. And it ended up being that the college that I went to is a liberal arts college. And I probably was a good junior, beginning, middle junior in physics up against people who, say at University of Texas at Austin, who not only take their full load, but have special sessions after to prep them for graduate school.
Okay. So real quick, if we're going back to your story now,
Yeah.
we are now talking about you're already in college, so you're on your own now. So obviously the challenges you faced earlier on, you're no longer facing, but you now, at your liberal arts college, you are not academically as prepared in physics as somebody else.
And I wasn't aware of that. And I had to work for a living, so I was tall. I lied. I worked at 7-Eleven type things with a fake ID.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
So I left home, and I started taking care of myself.
Okay.
One of the topics that we'll get back to is some of the professors that helped me. Again, the foreign influence.
Yeah. Okay. So again, if we're talking about our stories here, and again, I want to stop interrupting you because I want to keep hearing your story.
Please.
But here's what I really like, and here's what I want to do as an open invitation on this podcast. I'm not gonna share my story quite yet. I will share it, but later on. But obviously, I am very passionate. As not only I have 2 degrees, I have almost 2 master's degrees. One of them in science education, and I also have a degree in electrical engineering. Why both? It's a long story. I was also a science teacher, but that was a disaster. Oh my gosh, that was a disaster. It was more like if you've ever seen Kindergarten Cop, a story like that. There are skills that I do have, and there are skills that I do not have, or perhaps I should say do not have yet. But it was the most stressful time of my life. So I backed out of being a science teacher, and I finished a master's in electrical engineering. There's more to those details. But one of the things that I've always loved is sitting down and hearing people's stories, especially those who have a lot to say in science and technology and math, but also just about life in general. I like hearing people talk about challenges that they've faced and decisions they've made that make them unique. Now, where that applies to science and research, you just said that it's so cool to spend some time and just talk with people. Well, obviously, not everybody is your daughter who has not only your support, but your influence. But anybody who finds this channel can simply watch. So what I look forward to doing is interviewing people who have something to say about research in science. And maybe people can be inspired just by someone that they might see on this show. Like maybe somebody doesn't know about the field of medical physics, So what do you think? Some of the folks that your daughter has spoken to or other folks, let's get some scientists on this show, and they can offer some direction to anybody who's curious.
I think that's a wonderful idea, and we certainly have lots of contacts to do that.
What's even being researched right now? A lot of folks just think, well, science in general, it's just this word here. But let's talk about, let's roll up our sleeves and really lay down a map for what are areas of research that some undergrad somewhere might want to consider, as they're thinking about these topics. So that's what excites me. I'm thrilled to be doing a podcast where we can talk to scientists about research ideas with the possibility of inspiring somebody out there. That's really cool to me, I think. So
I think it's a wonderful idea. It's also presenting what books are good out there. What literally saved me in the sense of academia, was I ran into, and back then it was not volumes 1, 2, and 3, it was a tome.
Yeah.
And it was by Morris Klein, I believe Klein is the author, and it was a history of mathematical thought from the ancient times to modern times, and I blew past the Egyptians and the Babylonians, I don't care.
They're cool. The next episode will be all the math of the Egyptians. I'm just kidding. Okay.
And so he ended up showing step by step how the birth of physics and calculus-based physics led to differential equations, and he literally follows the ideas and how hard some of them were and how many decades some of them took, all the way through roughly the 1930s. Mm-hmm. And it was eye-opening. It was, so maybe I'm not dumb. Maybe my education
You're not dumb.
For a while I thought maybe I'm limited, I thought. Maybe that's a bachelor's in physics from a liberal arts school is it. Mm-hmm. But with this book, it opened up, in its literature, I was able to read, and I literally began teaching myself the equivalent, I would say, of a master's in math and physics in many areas, algebra, topology, algebraic topology, differential geometry, on and on, over 4 years that I was in the Air Force. And so, that's also what's influencing this program, is that if you present things concisely and how they happened historically, you'll have a lot less confused, even successful people, even people that have gone and have had the greatest life and they got their PhD in physics and they've earned it, or math. They typically walk out with huge gaps. And one of the aims of this podcast is to linearize that, make it compact. Physics is in mathematics are very compact. And here in this discussion, you're an engineer, and there's a difference.
Yes.
You don't have to learn much about vacuum tubes.
Correct.
We're in a solid state era, and we talked about in a previous episode how
real quick. Let's, for our audience here, vacuum tubes. How do we explain what vacuum? I mean, some of you guys know what vacuum tubes are, but
they still exist.
Yeah.
So vacuum tubes were the early ways to do what transistors do today.
Okay, transistors, which are all over
Switches,
everything, cell phones,
amplifiers,
yeah, computers. All computing is done through transistors.
There's probably 10, 20 billion in this laptop.
Yeah, tons. So a vacuum tube then is an old school way.
Right, they're little glass tubes. They get hot and they have filaments and they do various things.
Ooh, fascinating topic actually. During the Cold War, where there was not communication between the East and the West, we moved from vacuum tubes in the West to transistors. Well, on the East, they actually kept using vacuum tubes and they developed them further and further and further. I don't have the example here, but they did some really hotshot stuff with just vacuum tubes that we became aware of only once the Cold War was over. So
actually, Viktor Balenko, Russian fighter pilot, MiG-25 pilot, I don't know what his beef was with Russia, but he left.
Okay.
And he brought us a MiG-25, and it was like filled with these advanced vacuum tubes.
Wow, how about that?
So it was crazy? A shocker.
Wow, it's like that's fascinating because that's kind of like how evolution works. Because at one point we thought we had improved. We don't need them anymore, but then they make much, much, much better vacuum tubes.
So the derivative event to that, or derivative thinking after that, was, are they preparing for an electromagnetic impulse war? Are they going to set off nukes in our atmosphere, take us out, and have vacuum tubes that are much more sturdy to that stuff? And so that was one of the progenitors of the internet.
Oh, wow. Oh, okay. Wait. How was that a progenitor of the internet? I'm not following that.
Fiber optic cables, or cables buried underground that can't be coupled to EMP.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So
Crazy.
I think it was just because they couldn't do transistors.
No, but again, the way you say it, no, of course, they were so far advanced that they were even anticipating EMP pulses. That's what it was. It wasn't some,
right. They were geniuses.
Yeah, well, they were. There's some really smart Russians.
They're very good. And in the 1990s, we actually brought them over after the peace dividend thing happened.
That's another topic.
Russians over to New Mexico.
Speaking of bringing over nationals, immigrants, that's a whole nother topic, actually.
And I, as a lieutenant, was a glorified Walmart gopher. For them, I'd take them to our grocery stores, and they'd be bug-eyed. They'd like, wow, look at these grocery stores.
Wow.
And the way they were ahead of us was in high-powered microwave vacuum tubes, which are beasts. Yeah. And we were getting interested in that field. And this is, way back 30 years ago. So what they were really good at doing, since they didn't have supercomputers, is they were good at solving problems by hand, by brute force. I imagine they would camp them out in Siberia and say, see you in 3 years and turn in as much work as you can. I'm kidding on that, but
yeah,
we don't know.
Wow.
So what I wanted to say about engineering was, obviously, we're past the time of vacuum tubes, 99.9%, right?
Yeah.
Transmitters for radios and stations and TV stations might still use them.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things. Aerospace engineers today don't have to worry about assembling aircraft from rags and balsa wood and wireframes, right? That's gone. I would not want a surgeon from 1920 doing surgery on me. I would not want an open heart surgeon from the 60s when they began doing open heart surgery on me today.
Yeah.
So it's okay to forget the past. Physics and math are the exact opposite. If you know its history, it can be presented in a very compact way. All physics theories, geometric, general relativity, particle physics, which are internal symmetries, end up codified in algebraic topology and the field of fiber bundles.
Yes.
Wow. And then from there, you have the ramifications. Let's look at this. This is the E&M branch. This is the particle physics branch, the classical mechanics branch.
Wow.
And I think it's criminal. It's that you don't know that as a physicist and a mathematician unless you get lucky and you go to the right school where there are a handful of people, and some of them post on YouTube, that give their students that. Why there's no drive to universalize that, to democratize that, is beyond me. So anyways, that's one of my goals to do with you.
That's a thrilling goal. Well, not only for this podcast, but man, let's, network with other podcasters. Let's make that a thing, because, you bring up this is no offense to the field of physics. I'm sorry, engineering. No offense to the field of engineering, but you're right. I didn't learn about vacuum tubes at all in my engineering degree.
Well, that sucks.
Yeah, yeah, because they say, well, you don't need to. You know what I mean? Like, that's understood. But again, with physics and math and the fundamentals, you really got to know the history. And this is also, a theme that we were saying earlier in this video, where you were talking about these impossible tasks that look like you have these titans of mathematics, and you will never, ever, ever live up to their standards. Well, if you knew the history of how they got there,
exactly,
you're not dumb. Oh, so anybody watching this video, you're not dumb. It's you don't know the shortcuts, you don't know the history that people had. And I felt dumb so many times in my engineering degree. I met people who were raised with engineering fathers and mothers. Neither my mother or my father were engineers. One of them was a nurse. The other was a physical therapist who loved science. But, in terms of engineering, I was completely on my own. So I spoke with people who had dads who were engineers who worked with them all the time. And they could run circles around me. It was intimidating. Oh my gosh, it was intimidating. But anyways, all that to say, there's a lot of people who want to reach out, and hopefully one of the things that we'll have some success with this show is bringing scientists and engineers, to the audience. Anybody who wants to watch the YouTube show and get some inspiration, and at least begin to know what questions to ask and know what resources are out there.
And it starts young. Why not start in kindergarten, and why not proceed that way? And why is it that we present, things like simple harmonic motion and springs in the dullest possible way? We've talked about this. Quickly, the most boring thing, like a spring and a harmonic oscillator, quickly becomes living if you think about, well, how do we know if the sun is made out of different layers? Well, because different layers have different densities, and the sun is always shaking, and through its resonances, we figure out, oh, it's an onion, it looks like an onion, and many other stars like that. So it enriches our understanding of stars. At the atomic level, it's a decent model of the electrons orbiting the nucleus, other than that it takes discrete jumps. We can connect that to crime and to the popular TV show from a few years ago, I forgot the name of it, where you look at chemicals and you go, okay, because of the spring can only do these oscillations, that must be this poison.
Yes. Yeah, that's exciting. That's, science makes for some outstanding material for detective shows, actually, cutting edge science. So,
and then connecting human history with climate change, and how we're all tied together, and how the poor countries are going, you had your time to be carbon polluters, rich countries. Now it's our turn to be carbon polluters. So buzz off. Yeah. It's good to understand the complexity of whole systems, and not just in pieces.
Oh, totally.
And I think when you talk that way, most people will engage you and suddenly be inspired maybe to go forward.
Yeah. So I did this before, and I also did it in the middle, but I also do it again now. I'm talking about this episode. So essentially, this episode is a little bit of a why are we here? And, we talked about our own struggles, but also our own passionate desire. I didn't really say my story so much. That's fine. We'll save my story for another episode, right?
Yes.
But, but essentially, this is why we're here. We are very passionate about science and math and about humanity as a whole, and about questions that relate to our identity. And we especially want to make resources for people who may not have resources. It's impossible to tell if somebody is going to be successful. It very likely would have been that you or your sister weren't successful. Given your background, you were. And the question remains, who out there right now is in a similar situation that Alex was in, or that I was in, even though we didn't get into me yet, who just by virtue of hearing this story or a similar story might have some success. That's kind of what we want to do here. So that's some really exciting stuff. I do want to mention real quick that having gone through an undergraduate and a graduate program in physics, Alex has written multiple papers. Actually, I was going to say a paper, multiple papers. These get really mathy. So this really probably is more pertinent to those undergraduate physics students out there. But you have done the laborious task of going through these intense books and written how the hell to understand these intense books. You want to real quick plug some of the papers that you've written that are available right now. If you look in the comments section, I'm not even selling something here. This is for free. Free stuff here. This is knowledge being dropped on you from Dr. Alex Alaniz.
So I have truly been to war with many books and unraveled. I threw away thousands of pounds of book when I left Los Alamos. I mean, trying to thread history together because no one wrote it down in a nice way. So the notes, one of the ones I just checked on it. It's on ResearchGate, and if you have a ResearchGate account, you can get to my papers for free or through other means. In a few weeks I've collected over 2,000 reads on these step-by-step notes on, no kidding, how we got from classical physics to quantum mechanics, and how quantum mechanics, in the right limits, fall back to the classical formulations. And there are many such formulations. You're right, these are probably good for juniors, seniors in college, physics, math, first-year graduate students, even people who've finished doing their postdocs and like to unravel their own field. And so I have them on mathematics, on group theory, partial differential equations, etc. And so they're out there, and I'm hoping that they're the basis of finishing courses at some point for math and physics majors at the bachelor level and master's and PhD levels.
Yeah. So you've written a lot. This is just sort of like, instead of going through and creating your own trail, you sort of blaze a trail that others might want to see. And again, that's mostly those who are at the graduate level who want to see some intense physics papers. So that's exciting. So we've got a whole lot for you. So I also want to say, as a viewer of this program, I asked this question on my Facebook wall. I don't know if anybody watched it, but I asked this question: who were your favorite science teachers and why? So if you want to go ahead and share that with us, we'd love to talk about it on our next podcast. I also sent a question out where I not only expanded on your favorite science teachers, but your favorite science YouTubes. There's a lot of fantastic science YouTube shows out there as well, and I wanted to take a minute here and talk about them. There's a Discord server, and actually I'm a member of the Discord server for the channel Genetically Modified Skeptic, and I contribute to that Discord sometimes. So let me see if I can find the answer. Give me a second. Dun, dun, dun. It might be a minute.
What are you looking for?
We had a recommendation for YouTube shows, for science shows, so I was going to share a few of those. Unless there was anything else that we wanted to...
So while Gabriel is searching, one of the things that in a condensed way that I wanted to talk about is, someone says that how lucky you are is really a function of how much preparation you've done, how many things you've tried, at times the opportunities. And so if you've done a lot of preparation and groundwork, or you've had a lot of examples, like in my daughter's case, then opportunity is going to strike. And I believe that luck, therefore, is probably proportionate to your background and how enriched or poor your background may have been given circumstances.
Yeah. Now, Alex, I know that you like to model things and you really like mathematics. Would you say that you have written, say, a mathematical formula that describes success?
Why, certainly not.
You have not?
No.
What are you talking about? Well, I wrote one. Okay, I did one.
Please inform us.
So check it out. I'm going to share this with you. Tell me what you think. Now, Imagine this. So success is going to be 10% luck, 20% skill. I'd say 15% concentrated power of will.
Sounds good.
5% pleasure, 50% pain, and 100% reason to remember the name. No, I'm just kidding. That's totally from a rap song. Fort Minor, remember the name. So I think
that's a good beginning.
Yeah, I planned that joke all week, you guys. So cool. So yeah. Well, I guess we'll end this episode. Oh, I'm sorry.
You want to talk about the Martians and we'll wrap back to...
Okay. Real quickly, there is one example of 4 physicists that were brilliant. They were so brilliant that they were referred to as others as the Martians. Now, they have a unique background and a unique education that applies to them. So we'd like to talk about their story and why they are the way they are. Alex, I'll let you go ahead and take this one.
So very briefly, the Martians was attributed to Hungarian, which is apparently a really difficult language. these were kids at the time. Eugene Wigner, future Nobel Prize winner in physics for group theory, Gruppenpest, that wasn't liked. He was identified by his high school teacher, Laszlo Ratz, who was a brilliant mathematician, and took Eugene Wigner in and tutored him and mentored him and probably made him the reason that he succeeded. Johnny von Neumann of the von Neumann computer today, that was the next kid who went through this high school and also got mentored and built up. The other two are Leo Szilard, whom is the famous physicist sitting next to Einstein, writing the letter to President Roosevelt going, we better make atom bombs before the Germans do. And the fourth one was Edward Teller, who was the father of the American hydrogen bomb. These were the four Martians. There's other Martians if you look up Martians in Wikipedia, but these are the principal Martians. And we're talking about brain drains in this case. Hitler and his Nazi, political system with purifying the races forced these scientists to end up here working on our atom bomb project here 100 miles from Los Alamos. Amongst them, Enrico Fermi, who made the first nuclear reactor in Chicago. Lisa Meitner, who she figured out that bombs are possible and passed that on to Niels Bohr, who ended up here. And so there is this, function of losing your best people when you have nationalism and when you have anti-foreign, approaches. Right now, the United Kingdom is looking for 3 million, it will accept up to 3 million people from Hong Kong as China rolls in.
Wow.
And so they're going to have that brain drain.
So yeah, that's a very interesting one. And we bring that up because I know that part of politics, always part of it is, one issue is immigration. And
exactly.
It's a very, very deep issue. I don't think we have time to go into all of it here, but I think that our success in World War II was specifically because we took on an influx of scientists during that time. So that, the contributions of others is something to certainly be considered with immigration. You don't want to be too, you don't want to leave out very talented individuals who can bring a lot to your culture and to your society.
I suppose, and I'm going to say this, and not so much in jest, that my mother was born in Mexico. My father's family was born in Mexico. I mean, I might scare you. I might, you might think I'm trying to rape you because the president of the United States says that that's what Mexicans might do.
Yep. Not cool. Not a cool comment.
Not cool. And I wonder what the world would be like. I hope that I'm contributing to this country. I hope that I'm part of it. And like my friend in Houston who's making the COVID technology.
Yeah, he's an immigrant as well.
That we're causing things to progress forward.
Yeah. Where's he from?
He's from Italy.
Wow. Okay.
Io parlo italiano.
Yeah. Interesting.
I speak because I already spoke as a child, but with him in graduate school, I just went at full adult Italian.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. All right. So, all right. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this episode. A few things here. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comments section. We love interaction. If you enjoy what we do, please share this video. We love it. We want to increase our interaction with society, with everybody. We want to bring science to the people, and we want to get people engaging in really deep questions about science and about culture and about who we are. So please like and share. And if you want to support us, we also have a Patreon. If you go to patreon.com/touringrabbitholes, that would be outstanding as well. We're looking for ways to hire creative people to make some posters for us and some great videos and things like that. So I think that's all I have on my end.
It's all I have too, and please do comment, and then we will get back to them to you.
Thank you so
very
much. Yeah. Bye-bye.